Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining our ReadTech customer exclusive webinar, Year-End Pharma Deadlines with ReadTech SingleSource for Drug Products. In this webinar, we have our presenters, David Wilson, who is a Senior Account Executive and Pharma Team Lead here at ReadTech, and Caitlin Osborn, who is a Strategic Account Manager for Pharma here at ReadTech. So this webinar will take an overview of the pharma year-end deadlines and how to utilize SingleSource specifically to make these submissions. Plus, if you have any questions, please feel free to use the question box, enter them throughout the presentation. And if we have any, we will answer those at the end. This is a high-level overview of the deadlines with a focus mostly on how to make these submissions through SingleSource. So we wanted to let you know that we're doing another more detailed webinar on September 21st if you're interested in getting into some of the more granular specifics of what these deadlines do entail. So we'll definitely be sending follow-up emails with registration links to that. For anything else you're interested in that we don't cover today, you can check out our Knowledge Center at readtech.com. You can follow the navigation right here on this slide, and we will send these slides out to you as well. And also follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter for regular updates as well. And of course, you can reach out to your account management team here at ReadTech as well, and we're happy to answer any of your questions. So with that, I will kick the presentation off by handing it to David.
Great, thanks, Erin. We'd like to start by just covering some basic items on FDA's annual deadlines. Right, looking at some of these requirements, which are really kind of the tip of the iceberg of regulatory activities, going back from getting a product approved all the way through keeping our records and reporting so forth throughout year over year. So we're going to focus really on the middle three items: the establishment registrations, product listings, and labeling, but more specifically when it comes to that end of year reporting, the blanket no change certifications, because those are some of the exciting updates we have to present to you today that Caitlin will be sharing within SingleSource for drug products. Now, most of these registrations, as many of us know, and these reports need to be prepared in an extensible markup language or XML, specifically Health Level 7's structured product labeling XML format that the FDA has implemented. So while the FDA expects industry to comply with electronic drug registration and listing processes throughout the course of a year, today we'll really be focusing on the end of year activities, right? So when October 1st comes around and the FDA opens that window for industry to start making these certifications or registrations that would then apply for the next calendar year, which will be 2023 here. So we've already passed through the dog days of the summer, right? June, July drug listing updates, and the October 1st timing is quickly approaching. So we wanted to take this time to really help you understand just at a high level these regulations and what FDA is asking for and looking for, but also, like I said, allow Caitlin to really help showcase how SingleSource will help with that as well. We'd be remiss if we didn't also make you aware of a change to FDA structured product labeling format in what's new, right? While we will not focus on REMS during our time today, we wanted to make you aware. So for those of us that have a risk evaluation mitigation strategy on any of our products, starting December 28th of this year, the FDA will require that new and modified REMS be submitted in SPL XML. So this does not affect everyone in the audience, but if it does, you'll want to add this to kind of your annual end of year review, and contact us as early as you can, because we'd be happy to help if you already haven't, right? In this just kind of really details a bit of that timing. But we'll really start diving into it, right? With the first kind of activity that we typically see or most organizations are starting with will be the annual establishment registrations. So this is the registering or the registration of manufacturing facilities and organizations who manufacture drug products or do any business operations that are deemed as manufacturing business operations. What we see here, this is a screenshot of FDA's drug establishment current registration site. And the links below, I'll use my cursor here to point them out. This drug establishment registration search allows you to search by company name. And this drug establishment annual registration status download file, this is a zip file that you can download of all the raw data in a text format. That text information can be uploaded into an Excel spreadsheet for easier viewing, but really this is all facilities that have been registered with FDA. I typically use the search function more frequently. However, if you're having trouble finding a location because the search might not be working, that download can be very helpful. And then the link below is where you would go to access this site. The next slide here shows really just a screenshot from SingleSource for drug products on how to comply and how to update your facility registrations. This shouldn't be too new for most users and for most people that are managing establishment registrations with SingleSource for drug products. However, if you do have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. You can email either pharma@readtech.com or spl@readtech.com, and either team can get you to the right support. But essentially, on an annual basis, starting October 1st, is when we'll want to get our facilities properly registered. Now, I showed the last slide of where to review this information on FDA's site because that's a very helpful resource when certifying or reviewing our drug product label listings and ensuring that they're up to date. So the next couple of slides here will really talk about what is the drug listing certification, why is this important? So every active drug listing that's on file with the FDA that has not been initially listed or updated in the calendar year. So if you haven't made any changes to any drug listings in 2022, those are those drug listings that would qualify for certification. So at this point in time, typically organizations will start looking at their product portfolio, take a look at, are these products all still in the market? And in the concept of this drug product listing certification, or like we like to call and FDA does, the blanket no change certification. It's a statement confirming that all of the products that are in that technical file are accurate and up to date. This must be submitted via the electronic SPL file during that October to December timeframe. Anything later than December, come January, those files will be rejected. They won't pass validation. And anything before October, same thing. This may include multiple NDC numbers, multiple facilities manufacturing the product, and so forth. And like we said, these can now be created within SingleSource. So Caitlin will touch upon that in just a moment. Now, who must certify the drug listings? Really, anyone who is responsible for this process, right? So if you are a private label distributor who manages your own drug listings, typically we see those organizations managing their own blanket no change certification. If you are a manufacturer of drug products who submits your own drug listings, but also drug listings on behalf of the private label distributors you manufacture product for, you can submit a blanket no change certification for both your NDCs and your client's NDCs. So there's no right or wrong way of doing it. It's just really ensuring that you're communicating across your organization and your partners to ensure it's clear on who's performing these activities. And then what drug listings must be certified? So really, I like to think of it as what doesn't need to be certified. And the animal health products, they follow their own process. So if you have veterinary product listings, they do not utilize the structured product labeling format. But everything else we see here on this list does apply. So finished, unfinished, bulk, API listings, they all apply. Approved, unapproved listings, human prescription drugs, over-the-counter products, and the list goes on. So it's really what we tend to look at is if it was registered using the SPL process, using electronic drug registration listing service, and it has an NDC code, you're going to want to certify that NDC code. Now, what are the criteria, though, to be able to certify a product? In a current year, if the drug product was newly listed, it's already certified through to the next year. So even if you do certify it, it wasn't absolutely necessary, but you can, right? Or if there was an update to one of those drug listings in the calendar year, same thing applies. Now, if a product was delisted for a future date, that does not need to be included. In fact, it shouldn't be included in a blanket no change certification. Now, more importantly, these next couple items, if a product listing was either expired, if there's a data deficiency or marked as inactive by FDA, then there's some activity that needs to be done, and these cannot be included in a blanket no change certification. They should be drug listed individually. Each of those SPL files should be updated, and more importantly, you'd either want to communicate with ReadTech to understand, well, what is it that we see here, and it may even include some communication with the FDA's EDRLS team to confirm why was this marked inactive, what is the data deficiency. But in many cases, FDA does send notifications of when this is happening, and in the notification, we are able to help you understand what's happening. And then the other scenario might be if organizations who have product listings that were submitted in paper format but not electronically. And most of us on the call today shouldn't be in that scenario, but hey, it happens, right? So really, again, kind of continuing on the criteria here, what are we certifying? Is that the labeling narrative of the existing version that's been submitted to the FDA that we can view on DailyMed, or the record that might be hosted in the NDC directory, that the labeling's accurate, the product metadata is accurate, and the principal display panel is still accurate. So there are unique information in each of those three components we might want to double check to ensure everything's correct. And then ultimately that the last submitted SPL listing passes current FDA SPL validation rules. So this used to be back 2017, 2018, 2019, there were more changes to the validation rules. I believe earlier this year, there were also some changes, but they started in January. So most of those scenarios we were able to help correct for a lot of our clients, but some of them do include like repackaged or relabeled products that might need a source NDC code. So something to keep in mind in looking at this and reviewing the blanket no change certification. Now, one of the really helpful kind of databases or locations that industry can go to, here's the FDA's NDC directory. The NDC directory will allow us to search using the search. You can download the database files. These two first files, the database file and the unfinished drug database, they're very specific to whether it's a product that's a distributor's listing or a manufacturer's listing. And then the database excluded drug database file is where you will find any drug listings that were expired or were marked as inactive. Or you may have heard me say this before, this is what I call that naughty list, right? This is the list where if any of the NDC codes that you might be managing show up on here, they need to be corrected with a drug listing. They won't apply with a blanket no change certification. And then really what we tend to see as the common validation issues to check will be that what I'd mentioned earlier, right? You shouldn't be including delisted products that include marketing end dates. You cannot include in expired listings. They have to be current and active drug listings that are in a good state with the agency, and to check all the establishments that are registered. We see, especially with the over-the-counter industry these days, with OMUFA and the introduction of user fees, it caused a lot of organizations to to close their manufacturing doors, if you will. And if a manufacturing establishment registration is not present in FDA's drug establishment current registration site, that blanket no change file that might be referencing information from previous drug listings will fail. So yeah, some of the top things to keep in mind. But now what I'll do is pass it on over to Caitlin, who will help review the single source for drug products, show you how the application works for building the blanket no change file. And Caitlin, I will change the presenter to you right now.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Dave, can you give me a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Thank you. Awesome. So now I'm going to give a quick demonstration of this new functionality in SingleSource in my demo environment here. So you'll see when you log into the home page, we're going to want to go to the registrations tab. And if we have turned on this functionality for you, you will now have this third option of the blanket no change. Keep in mind, we will need you to notify us what users should have this functionality turned on. So please just send us an email with that contact list and we will get that up and running for you. Great. So to create a new form, we're just going to select new blanket no change form. And this is going to open up a wizard of 3 pages that will help structure and refine the blanket no change certification. So first and foremost, we're going to have to give this a form name. We suggest providing a name of the authorized agent and then the date that you're creating this form. So I will make this for Read Pharma. And then the SPL revision date, this will have to be in the 4th quarter. So we'll open up the calendar and jump to October. The SPL version number should remain the same. We do not want to modify that. And then we're going to have to provide a contact name. Great. And then their phone number. Perfect. And then their email. Their company name. And then their DUNS. Perfect. So we can either save this as a draft and come back to it later, but we're going to go to the next form. And by default, the blanket no change form is going to pull in all products in your portfolio that are stored in SingleSource that do not have a marketing end date, and it will also exclude all animal products. And with this page, users can further restrict the form. On this first tab here, you can mark off to include all products that have had updates within this past year. You can also include products from a specific establishment. So if we check this off, we can then search any of the establishments in our site to include. And then you can also specify the labeler company that you want to identify. You can also consolidate all of the products under one specific establishment if you wish, and you would enter that information here. For today, we're going to mark off this first option to include all products, even if they've been updated within this year. Great. So now it pulls in all of my products. Before I jump into filtering this down even more, I do want to let you know at any point if you need to jump back to the section 1 or 2 of the blanket no change form, you can do that. You can bounce back and forth. And then also, once you get to this third page, if you realize maybe there's a typo in the phone number or the email address, that can be modified with this panel on the left-hand side. Great. So now, once we've gone through the products to identify what should be included in the blanket no change form, we can then validate against FDA's business rules to see if there's any warnings or error messages. And it looks like I am good to go. One message that you may receive is if there is a duplicate of the product. And if you do see that, we can simply search by the NDC code or the form name to identify that duplicate. And anything that should be removed from the form can simply be marked off, and then you would select to delete. You can also do a manual entry of the establishments by typing in this information down below. But once you've successfully gathered all of your products that should be included in the form, just like all of our other forms in SingleSource, we would simply ignore warnings if needed, and then we would build that blanket no change XML file. And now we'll be directed back to the blanket no change form, and what we'll do is go into the blanket no change deliveries. And this is where we can download that delivered file. And from there, we would want to just review that, make sure all of the information is reflected properly. And once you are ready to go, you can then either create the order in SingleSource for the ESG submission, or if you manage your own ESG gateway, you would make that submission yourself by just downloading this file. One thing I do want to include is in October, we are coming out with another release of this blanket no change functionality where it will link directly to DailyMed, and it will note any expired or delisted products that can be identified and removed in the form. And there will be more to come on that as well, where I believe the expected release date is late October. Great. Dave, I can pass it back to you.
Great, thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, and we're eagerly anticipating that functionality for the cross-reference, because that'll be very helpful, especially organizations with larger product portfolios that want to ensure that they're submitting this correctly the first time. And one of the other things we've seen from a best practices is when building these files, if there is a validation error, right? Let's say, for example, one NDC code failed, and we need to ensure that we're selecting the correct document, or selecting the correct forms. The idea of what a user can do is then go back into the form that you've created there, remove the item that was causing the validation, rebuild the file, and resubmit. So similar to how you use SingleSource for drug products for the other metadata updates you make, whether it's for facility registrations, labeler codes, or drug listings, that same functionality exists where multiple versions can be created. One thing I will point out is if you have multiple files you are creating, though, you'll want different files with different set IDs. So that way it doesn't overwrite the information from another set ID. So that's important to keep in mind. Great, so can you see our presentation again, Caitlin? Great. So moving forward, Caitlin, from that perspective of the cross-validation and so forth, would you like to walk us through, okay, we've built the file, we've submitted, what's next, what's happening behind the scenes?
Yep, so when you do submit the blanket no change certification, it's validating several things. So, and I believe we touched upon this a bit earlier, but it's confirming that the NDC product codes are valid, and it's relisting it for the following year. So this year, when we do this in the fourth quarter, it's going to extend that registration through the end of 2023. It's also validating the establishments involved. So like David mentioned, if any of the establishments are not currently registered with FDA, it's going to come back as invalid with an error in SingleSource to review. And if that is submitted, FDA would cause a validation error, and the blanket no change would not be successfully submitted. So we would want to make sure before all of that, before that blanket no change form is populated and submitted, that all of that information is up to date and correct.
Great. And I know we talked a bit about this just a moment ago and how excited we are about the cross-referencing, but I think kind of the main point here is that this can happen. Help us understand kind of what typically the processes are if a blanket no change certification fails in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yep, so if your blanket no change certification fails, first and foremost, I would suggest always reach out to our SPL conversion team. They can help guide you through why it has failed, and they would help find how to remedy the validation error. We would help by identifying that error. One of the errors could be that an NDC code was included that should not have been included. Sometimes the document ID or version number is wrong. So that's why I mentioned in the demonstration, we do not want to change that version number. We're going to leave it as is. And we're also going to confirm that the date is in the fourth quarter, because if it is not, it cannot be submitted as a blanket no change. We can then correct those errors and update the drug listing or the establishment registration as needed.
Great. Yeah, and again, we understand product portfolios can be huge, that there's a lot going on. The last slide here talks a bit about, what if I didn't certify? So Caitlin, we've seen this happen in the past. I know we do a lot of communication internally to our partners to help them understand, hey, this is coming up. You need to start working on it. And we absolutely suggest start working on it sooner than later. But what if the blanket no change certification process is missed?
Yep. So if the file is not submitted by December 31st, on January 1st, you're going to then be marked as, or the product will be marked as expired. If this does happen, technically you are misbranded with the product. And in the NDC directory, I believe it's about a month that you can still see the product. It's going to show in a red color showing that it's expired. You also typically receive an email from FDA notifying you that your product is expired. You have a certain amount of time to relist the product. And from that point, how we can help you is we're going to have to redo the SPL submission of the file. At that point, the blanket no change cannot be submitted since it's no longer the fourth quarter. So our team would help you relist the product properly. That way it is then valid on FDA databases.
Great. Yeah, and the good news for those of you on the call today is the single source for drug products would allow you to make that immediate metadata update to any drug listings that were missed. So usually that's typically what's needed, unless there was a previous data discrepancy with the file that FDA was requiring something else to be updated as well. So, but usually and typically what we'll see is the validation errors that are being triggered by the gateway will help us understand that, and we can review it with you and ensure that the details are corrected appropriately. And like Caitlin mentioned earlier, we do pride ourselves in our support of you and your organizations. We're here to help. So whether it's the SPL orders team or the Pharma at readtech.com team that Caitlin and I help support you with, we're happy to help review this, whether it's reviewing ahead of time. If there is any type of error and you'd like to take a look at it, we're here to assist. The end of year can be a crazy time, not just with work and all the various things we have to have on our plates, but also with the holiday seasons and so forth. So yeah, we're always happy to assist in any way we can. So Aaron, that really wraps up the majority of what we had prepared for presentations. Looks like we have a couple minutes left. Did we want to open it up for some questions, or I'll hand it over to you.
Sure. Well, thank you, Caitlin and Dave. That was a great presentation, very thorough. We have about 1 minute left, and actually all of the questions that we got were very account specific. So I let everyone know that their individual account managers will be reaching out to them to kind of clear some things up. But just as a reminder, if you do have any questions, please email us at pharma@readtech.com or reach out to your individual account manager. Also, as I mentioned, we'll be sending out some information about a September 21st webinar that really gets a little bit granular, back to the basics, the history of SPL, all that good stuff if you're interested. And also, Caitlin, David, and myself will all be at RAPS Convergence this coming September 11th to 13th. So please stop by booth 517 and see us if you have any questions. We would definitely love to meet any of you we haven't gotten to meet in person yet. And we're going to be doing some cool giveaways, an AirPods raffle. And we're going to be doing Navigator for drug label demos all 3 days. So definitely stop by and see us if you have any questions or just want to say hello. So with that, thank you all for joining today, and we look forward to speaking to you again.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Bye, everyone.